So now that we covered a lot and we have our build controls set up and can build a burger, let's create that modal which allows us to display a order summary. This modal should be shown once we click a checkout button, which we also have to add below our build controls. So these are the things I want to do next. Add this checkout button to the build controls and add this modal, which should basically wrap itself around some kind of order summary, which probably should also go into its own component. Let's build this step by step, and let's start with the checkout button. For that, let's go to the build controls because I want to add the checkout button at the bottom of these controls. And there we can now simply add this button in the end, which should show this modal in the end. So what I'll add here is a normal button, normal HTML button element, or JSX as it always is here, but you know what I mean with HTML. And this button should say order now. I'm going to put this caption in all caps, but that of course is optional. You can style this button and the text on the button in whichever way you want. Now the button, speaking of styling, should of course also receive some styles. So let's open build controls, and attached to this file you will find the CSS code for this button. Here I simply added the order button CSS class, then I added the hover and active styles, the disabled style, which we want to use when we can't order the burger because we haven't added any ingredients, and a little animation here which will simply animate the button once it does become active. Now with that added to the CSS file, make sure to save the updated build controls CSS file. And now we can add our class name to that button, and there it is, the CSS class name I just added in the CSS file, order button, and simply check the file to confirm this, order button, this CSS class. So this is the button style. Now to disable this button, we need to check whether all ingredients have an amount of 0 or if at least one of the ingredients is at 1, which would make this button activated, because then we could of course click it. So this logic to check whether this button should be active, so whether we can purchase the burger or not, of course should be managed in the burger builder container, because that is where we have the state, that is where we know how much of each ingredient we want to add to this burger. What we need to know here is the total amount of all ingredients. So basically a sum of all the ingredients. And I will simply add a new property where I will say purchasable. And I will set this to false initially. Now purchasable should simply become true once we can buy this, purchasable, once we can buy this burger, so once at least one ingredient is 1 or more. Now I will add a new method to the burger builder, update purchase state, any name you like does it here, and I want to call this method at the end of add ingredient and remove ingredient handler to then simply check whether we need to or whether we should turn purchasable to true or to false. Therefore here I want to check the ingredients I have in my state. So I will create a new object here to create a copy of this state ingredients. Now I need to sum up all the values here. Now that is super easy to do in the end. What I need to do is I need to turn this object here into an array again, into an array of these values here. Now for that, what I can do is I can create a sum constant where I take my JavaScript object, and there I use keys again and pass my ingredients to it. And this will again create an array of string entries, salad, bacon, cheese, and so on. Now I said that I need these values here though, so the amounts of the ingredients, not the names. Well, we can simply map this array into the array we need. So I'll do this in a new line to make it easier to read. The map method, of course, still receives the key, and then this is used in, or the function we pass to the map method receives the key, I should say, and then we can use this to return a new value and replace the old value, which was the property name, salad, and so on, with that new value. And here I simply want to return ingredients and there the value for a given key. And this will be the amount, because with ingredients and this notation, I'm accessing a certain property in the ingredients object. IG key is salad, bacon, and so on. So I'm basically getting these values, the numbers, and that is what I return for each key. So now I have an array of values. Now all I need to do is call reduce to again reduce this array, this time not to flatten the array, but to turn it into a single number, the sum of all ingredients. For that, we'll have a starting number of 0, and then we have a function which is executed on each element in this mapped array. In this function, I get the new sum and the individual element. And keep in mind, sum simply is the constantly updated current sum up until the current iteration where this function is executed, and once this function was executed on all array elements, sum is the final result. And here I simply return the current sum plus the element, and keep in mind, element is a number because it is the value we accessed here. With that I got a sum constant which is 0 if we have no ingredients added, or any other number representing the total amount of ingredients. And with that I can simply call setState and set purchasable to, and now it depends on whether sum is greater than 0 or not. So I will set it to sum greater 0. This is either true or false. And it is true if we have at least one ingredient, then purchasable is true, and that is exactly the behavior I want. So now with that we got purchasable, and we can now pass this down to build controls. So let's add a new property. Let's also name the property purchasable maybe. And let's bind the property to this state purchasable. And with that we pass the information about whether we can check this burger out and pay for it or not down to the build controls, where I can now take this information to disable this button or, well, enable it. So let me split this over multiple lines and bind disabled of this HTML button element. Again, it is JSX, but it will render a button in the end. Let's bind this to props, and there it was, purchasable, what we just set up. Now, if we save this and we go back to our running application, we have this order now button down there, though it is enabled here, and it shouldn't be. So purchasable somehow isn't passed on correctly. Let me quickly have a look at what's wrong. I identified the problem. Purchasable, of course, is true if the burger is purchasable. Disabled should be set to true though if it's not purchasable. So we simply have to invert this here. So add an exclamation mark in front of props purchasable, and now the button should be disabled. It of course never becomes active though, because we never call the nice little helper method we created. This update purchase state method, we never call it. We should call it after running add ingredient handler or remove ingredient handler. So there I will then also execute this update purchase state, the same on the end of the remove ingredient handler. And with that added, if we now save this, we should see that the button is disabled, but as soon as I add one ingredient, it stays disabled. Only once I add a second one it becomes active. Now why is that? Do you spot the error? It has something to do with the update purchase state method. The problem is that the ingredients which I'm analyzing is of course my old state here. Now, due to the way setState works, when we execute update purchase state, we might not get the updated ingredients. And therefore, once we copy the ingredients and analyze them, we might simply get an outdated version. Now we can of course simply fix this by passing the updated ingredients we have in add and remove ingredient handler anyways to the update purchase state method, and expect to get ingredients there. So ingredients. And now we can simply use these ingredients inside this method instead of the copy from the state. Now if we save this, right on the first item we add, it becomes active, and we have to remove all ingredients to disable the button again. And there you also see this nice animation. So we get the button, this is step number 1. Now in the next step, I want to also add a modal to display the order summary and not just show the button. So let's move on to that in the next lecture.